All right, now to, I think, something that surprised all of us when we saw it pop up. A stunning death of actor Malcolm Jamal Warner, who rose to fame. You know that face. He still looks exactly like Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show.
The tragic drowning accident that claimed Malcolm Jamal Warner's life at the age of 54 has eerily validated the warnings Katt Williams shared about the entertainment industry. While fans worldwide mourn the loss of the beloved actor, disturbing questions emerge about the circumstances surrounding his death. In this video, we'll discover the unsettling parallels between Warner's unexpected death and the warnings Williams has been voicing for years about the dangers lurking within Hollywood. Are you ready for the unsettling discoveries? Come along. Katt Williams' warnings that were ignored. For years, people had watched Katt Williams stand on stages and sit in interviews, speaking about things most celebrities would rather keep behind closed doors. He had been warning anyone who would listen about the darker side of Hollywood, even though doing so often came with a heavy price. Some thought he was exaggerating, others admired his boldness, but nobody could deny that he spoke with a conviction that felt rare in the entertainment world. Then came January 2024, when his appearance on Shannon Sharpe's Club Shay Shay podcast exploded online, racking up over 83 million views. In that conversation, he didn't just scratch the surface. He dug deep into the topics he had been speaking about for years. It was as if the rest of the world was finally catching up to what he had been saying all along. Through it all, people noticed something about him. Katt Williams had never been the type to bend his principles just to fit in, no matter how much it cost him. And in Hollywood, wasn't that the quickest way to make yourself a target? Katt Williams has been warning us for years, and now, with Malcolm Jamal's death, it's all starting to make sense. But how deep does this go? Stay to the very end, because the truth might shock you. One of the points he kept returning to over the years was something that had stirred a lot of controversy: Hollywood's habit of putting black male comedians in dresses for comedic roles. It wasn't just about clothes for him. It was about what he saw as a deliberate attempt to humiliate and emasculate black men in front of the world. In his viral 2024 interview, he even revealed that he had put a clause in his contracts refusing to work with Ricky Smiley unless Smiley was in a dress, saying, in his own sharp way, that him and Tyler Perry can't play a man to save their life. He also shared that he had turned down a role in Big Mama's House, Like Father, Like Son, because it would have required him to wear what would have been, as he put it, his first dress. Some of his peers, like Marlon Wayans, dismissed these views as silly, but Katt didn't budge. He saw it as part of a bigger pattern in the entertainment industry, one where success for black men often came with strings attached, and those strings could pull at your dignity until it was gone. But his concerns didn't stop at wardrobe choices. Katt spoke about things that made people shift uncomfortably in their seats. He claimed that disgraced film producer Harvey Weinstein had once offered to perform a sexual act on him, something Katt rejected outright. He talked about turning down a $50 million deal simply because it would have meant compromising his integrity, saying that he wasn't willing to take shortcuts to get ahead. And then there were his accusations against other comedians, alleging that Cedric the Entertainer had stolen one of his jokes for the original Kings of Comedy, criticizing Steve Harvey and others for letting false narratives stand, and explaining how industry executives had actively blocked his efforts to create tasteful black programming. In his view, the industry was not just competitive, it was corrupt. He described his early mission as trying to build a safe space for black actors and comedians, a place where politics, hierarchy, and the infamous casting couch had no power. But was such a place even possible in Hollywood? It didn't take long for the pushback to start. After Katt began speaking more openly, whispers about his mental health started circulating. Still, he refused to let those rumors define him. Even as people tried to paint him as unpredictable or difficult, Katt continued working towards something bigger than himself: Malcolm Jamal Warner's life and quiet resistance. Malcolm Jamal Warner's story was not the kind that Hollywood usually told, but perhaps that was exactly why it stood out. Unlike so many of his peers, he had managed to carve out a career that was both long-lasting and deeply respected. all without bending to the usual pressures and flashy demands of the entertainment world. People often wondered, how had he done it? In an industry where loud scandals and public feuds were almost treated like a form of currency, Warner had chosen another route entirely. His path was quiet but deliberate, full of choices that reflected thought, integrity, and a refusal to let others define what his career should look like. He first stepped into the public eye as Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, a role that did more than just make him famous. It shifted the way Black families were seen on American television. The Huxtables weren't caricatures or tired stereotypes. They were complex, loving, and successful, and Warner's portrayal of Theo played a big role in that. After the show ended, he could have easily gone for roles that would pay well but strip away the dignity of his earlier work. But he didn't. Instead, he became intentional about every part he accepted, choosing characters that were layered and real. His role as Dr. Alex Reed in Read Between the Lines showed audiences a version of Black fatherhood that was warm, intelligent, and inspiring, a man who could be professional and nurturing at the same time. How often does television get that balance right? But Warner wasn't content with simply showing up in front of the camera. He also stepped behind it, directing episodes of Malcolm and Eddie, The Cosby Show, and other series. There, he had the chance to shape the stories themselves, making sure they reflected authenticity rather than tired industry cliches. It was a quieter kind of rebellion, one that didn't make headlines, but chipped away at the narrow ways Hollywood often portrayed Black life. He wasn't the type to take to a stage and call out the industry in fiery speeches like Katt Williams might, but his resistance was no less real. It just came in the form of steady, thoughtful creation. And then there was the matter of his personal life. While other celebrities found themselves tangled in public scandals, messy divorces, or social media blow-ups, Warner seemed to exist in another orbit entirely. He kept his private life exactly that, private. No endless paparazzi shots of drunken nights, no public meltdowns, no screaming matches caught on camera. Instead, he poured his energy into his work, not just as an actor and director, but also as a musician. This focus became its own kind of shield. By refusing to give the tabloids anything to feed on, he sidestepped the traps that have swallowed so many careers whole. Wasn't that, in its own way, one of the smartest moves an actor could make? Over the decades, his discipline paid off. While the Hollywood landscape changed, sometimes drastically, Warner remained steady, his reputation intact, his work respected. 4 decades without major scandals or career-ending drama was no small feat in an industry that often seemed to demand both. His career was living proof that there was another way to survive in Hollywood, one built on professionalism, consistency, and staying true to oneself. In more recent years, Warner found a new outlet for his voice through his podcast, Fulfilled. It became a space where he could talk openly, without the constraints of studios or networks shaping his words. The conversations covered everything from personal growth to the unspoken rules of the entertainment industry. Every so often, his guests and listeners would catch glimpses of his real feelings about Hollywood, its treatment of Black talent, its resistance to authentic storytelling, and the constant fight for creative control. They weren't rants, and they weren't framed to provoke controversy, but the message was there for anyone willing to listen. Then came the final episode. Released just days before his sudden and unexpected death, it struck a chord with many who heard it. Some believed it contained veiled criticisms of the industry's inner workings, subtle but pointed observations that took on new weight in light of what happened next. The timing was eerie, too close for comfort, and it stirred whispers and speculation. People couldn't help but wonder, had he been trying to say something more? Was there a connection between his final words and the battles that so many, like Katt Williams, had been speaking about more bluntly? Warner's journey had never been about the loudest voice in the room. It was about the most consistent one. He didn't rage against the machine in front of cameras or in viral interviews, but his work, his choices, and his unshakable standards told their own story. And in the end, whether through quiet determination or open confrontation, He and others like Williams were fighting for the same thing: dignity, authenticity, and a place for Black artists to tell their own stories without compromise. The methods may have been different, but the mission was the same. And isn't that what truly matters in the long run? And speaking of missions that defined a generation, there's one moment in history that still stirs heated questions, raw emotions, and endless speculation. It's a day that shook not just a community, but the world, the day Malcolm died. What really happened? Stay with me, because the truth is layered, controversial, and impossible to turn away from once you hear it. The day Malcolm died, what really happened? The news of Malcolm Jamal Warner's sudden drowning on July 20th, 2025, left fans around the world in shock, and yet even weeks later, the details remain tangled in a web of unanswered questions and conflicting reports. The official line was simple enough at first. The beloved actor, best known for his role on The Cosby Show, had died at age 54 while vacationing with his family at Playa Cocles in Costa Rica's Limon province. But as more information trickled out, the story began to change, sometimes in small ways, other times in ways that seemed to directly contradict earlier accounts. And for many people following the tragedy, those contradictions have been impossible to ignore. In the beginning, Costa Rican authorities painted a heartbreaking picture. They said Warner had been swimming with his 8-year-old daughter when both were suddenly caught in a rip current. The implication was that a father's protective instinct may have led him into danger as he tried to keep his child safe. But not long after, Costa Rica's Judicial Investigation Agency, OIJ, issued its own statement, and it told a very different story. According to them, Warner had been playing with his daughter near the shoreline, but at some point, he left her safely out of the water before heading into the sea with a friend. That shift in the narrative wasn't just a minor clarification, it completely altered the scene of events. This is where things became even murkier. Elberth Leon, chief of the tourist police and one of the first responders to the incident, publicly challenged the OIJ's version. He stated with certainty that what he saw did not match what the agency was claiming. Leon even pointed out that the Red Cross treated Warner's daughter right there on the beach and determined she didn't need further medical attention, something that seemed to undercut the idea that she'd been pulled from the ocean alongside her father in a rip current. "I don't know why the OIJ is saying that," Leon remarked, "since they weren't even present at the scene. How could two official sources be this far apart on something so crucial?" The body was eventually taken to a morgue for autopsy, and the final cause of death was listed as asphyxiation by submersion, in other words, drowning. But that cold, clinical explanation didn't fill in the gaps. It didn't explain why Warner, a grown man with no known health crisis that day, would walk into dangerous waters. It didn't explain why his daughter's role in the events kept shifting. And it certainly didn't explain the strange absence of basic safety measures that could have made all the difference. On the day Warner lost his life, the beach was completely unprotected by lifeguards. For a destination known to attract both tourists and locals, that fact alone is startling. The Caribbean Guard, Costa Rica's volunteer lifeguard group, later admitted on Facebook that they were not present at Playa Cocles at the time. Their reason? Limited resources. They explained that recent incidents at Playa Negra had forced them to move personnel there and to Chiquita Beach, another notoriously risky spot. They even admitted that Playa Cocles was one of their most challenging beaches, and said they had posted signs warning visitors of the danger of death due to drowning. If the warnings were there, why didn't they stop Warner or anyone from going in? And how could such a high-risk beach be left without even one lifeguard? The official story still doesn't quite fit together. For one thing, there's the baffling change in accounts about Warner's daughter. Was she in the water during the accident or not? For another, there's the reality that the beach's dangerous reputation was no secret, and yet an experienced adult still chose to go into the water. To make matters stranger, according to a doctor who was part of the rescue effort, the beach had very few people on it that day because the sea was visibly rough. It makes you wonder what made Warner and the man with him decide to brave such dangerous conditions? And perhaps most haunting of all, was this truly just a tragic accident? Or is there more to the story than the public is being allowed to know? Which brings us to something that's going to make you rethink everything you thought you knew. How Malcolm's death mirrors the very things Katt tried to warn us about. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear next might just change the way you see both stories forever. How Malcolm's death mirrors Katt's warnings. In the days following Warner's sudden and tragic passing, many couldn't help but notice how eerily it lined up with the kind of warnings Katt Williams had been sounding for years. People began to say that the timing, the details, and even the way the news was handled didn't quite sit right. Was it really just an unfortunate accident, or was there more beneath the surface? When looked at through the lens of industry control that Williams had been talking about for so long, the whole thing seemed far from a random twist of fate. Within hours of the announcement, social media was flooded with tributes, kind words, heartfelt posts, and emotional reflections from big names in the business. Yet many couldn't ignore the uncomfortable truth. A lot of these same voices had been silent about Warner's work for years. Where was this love when he was alive and pushing against the grain? Where was the applause when he was taking risks, challenging industry norms and speaking truths that didn't fit the scripted narrative? As Williams himself once said, the entertainment industry has a way of withholding recognition from those who refuse to play the game, and Warner was one of those who played by his own rules. People pointed out how ironic it was that the same executives and celebrities who had once kept their distance were now celebrating his career as though they had championed him all along. The praise poured in for his groundbreaking work on representation, his independent projects, and his bold podcast. But where were these supporters when those very projects needed funding, coverage, or even just a public boost? His podcast in particular had been a platform where Warner shared sharp, eye-opening commentary on how the industry really worked. Yet during his lifetime, the mainstream barely acknowledged it. Then, as if on cue, once Warner could no longer speak for himself, clips from his final episodes began circulating everywhere. Was this a genuine tribute, or a way to control which parts of his voice the public would hear? Williams had often argued that black voices in entertainment are only amplified when the industry can shape the narrative to its advantage, and here was a textbook example unfolding in real time. And then there was the matter of the drowning. The official explanations came quickly, but they left more questions than answers. Details seemed inconsistent, and each new statement added to the confusion instead of clearing it up. Williams had warned that when uncomfortable truths threaten to surface, the industry moves fast to manage the story, making sure the public is left with just enough uncertainty to stop asking too many questions. Was this one of those times? People couldn't shake the feeling that they were being handed a neatly packaged version of events that didn't match the reality. In the end, people were left with a chilling sense that Warner's voice was silenced at the very moment it had begun to carry the most weight, just as Williams had warned it might happen. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.